The easiest way to hide who you are is to make sure nobody ever looks twice. I learned that lesson long before I walked into the Bellamy Hotel that rainy Thursday night. My name was Emily Carter. I was 27 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and dressed in an oversized grey sweater, loose black pants, and worn white sneakers. Nothing about me looked remarkable. That was exactly the point. The Bellamy was the kind of hotel where people noticed everything: crystal chandeliers, polished marble, designer watches, expensive cars waiting beneath the covered entrance. People here remembered faces, names, and clothes. So I gave them nothing worth remembering. I kept my hair tied back. I spoke softly. I pushed my housekeeping cart through the halls and disappeared before anyone could ask who I was. The night shift paid $3 more an hour, which mattered when you were trying to build a quiet life from scratch. At 10:47 p.m., rain covered Chicago in a silver haze beyond the 7th floor windows. I was folding fresh towels when the elevator doors opened behind me. 3 men stepped out wearing dark suits. They didn't look like hotel guests. They looked like men who expected doors to open before they reached them. I lowered my eyes and kept working. Then the hallway went strangely quiet. I didn't need to turn around to know someone important had arrived. Still, curiosity made me glance over my shoulder. Adrian Cole stood near the elevator, 34 years old, impossibly calm, black hair neatly brushed back, dark coat, perfect suit, the kind of man who never had to introduce himself because everyone already knew his name. I knew it too. Adrian Cole was a businessman, according to newspapers, a philanthropist, according to charity events. But in Chicago, people whispered another name when they thought no one was listening. Mafia boss. I had spent years learning not to be curious about powerful men, so I looked back at my towels. Keep moving. Don't be noticed. Don't be remembered. I pushed the cart forward. 5 feet. 10. 15. Then I heard his voice. You. My hands tightened around the cart handle. I stopped. Yes, sir? I turned slowly. Adrian was looking directly at me. Not my uniform. Not the cart. Me. His eyes moved briefly over my oversized sweater, and the sleeves pulled down over my hands. Then they returned to my face. Have we met before? My heartbeat changed. I forced a polite smile. I don't think so. He studied me for another second. What's your name? Emily. I almost said nothing else. Then I remembered the badge clipped to my sweater. Emily Carter. Something unreadable passed through his expression. You work nights often. Most nights. Why? I shrugged. The extra pay. That answer seemed to interest him more than it should have. He glanced toward the rain-covered windows, then back at me. You always dress like that. I looked down at myself. Like what? Like you're trying not to be noticed. The words landed harder than I expected. For one dangerous second, I forgot how to breathe. I had spent years perfecting invisibility, years making sure nobody looked too closely, and somehow, this was the first night a man had looked past the clothes and noticed the reason behind them. I lowered my eyes and gripped the cart again. Maybe I just don't like attention, Mr. Cole. He didn't move. Maybe. His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. Then he stepped aside and let me pass. I pushed the cart down the hallway, forcing myself not to look back, but I could feel his eyes following me, and for the first time in years, I had the unsettling feeling that disappearing might no longer be enough. The next morning, I told myself I had imagined the whole thing. Adrian Cole had probably forgotten me before he reached the lobby. Men like him had bigger things to remember than a night shift housekeeper in an oversized sweater. At least, that was what I wanted to believe. By 8:30 in the morning, the 7th floor was already quiet again, washed in pale sunlight after the storm. I finished my last room, signed the cleaning sheet, and headed toward the service elevator. I was almost there when I noticed 2 men standing near the hallway entrance. Hotel security. They were not looking at me, but something about their posture made me slow down. One of them stepped aside when I approached. Miss Carter. I stopped. Yes? Mr. Cole asked that you bring this to him when your shift ends. He handed me a small white envelope. My name was written across the front in neat black ink. I stared at it for a moment. Why would Mr. Cole need me to bring him anything? The guard gave a polite smile. He did not say. I took the envelope, but I did not open it. That was the first rule I had learned after changing my life. Never accept something when you do not know what it costs. I carried it back to the staff room and placed it inside my locker. Then I waited. 11 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, I opened it. There was only one sentence inside. Meet me in the lobby before you leave. No explanation, no threat, no request disguised as an order. Somehow, that made me more nervous. I changed out of my uniform and pulled on the same loose grey sweater from the night before. I almost laughed when I caught my reflection in the staff bathroom mirror. Of course I had chosen the biggest thing I owned. Old habits were difficult to break. When I reached the lobby, Adrian was standing near the tall windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. He was alone this time. No assistants, no security team, just him, holding a cup of coffee and watching the morning traffic move below. He turned when he heard my footsteps. You came. You asked me to. That is not the same thing. I folded my arms. Then why did you ask? His eyes rested on me for a moment. Because I was curious. About what? You. I almost smiled. That seems like a waste of curiosity. He took a slow sip of coffee. You are careful. Most people call that boring. Most people do not notice details. His gaze dropped briefly to my sleeves. I instinctively pulled them lower. He noticed that too. Of course he did. Why do you always cover your hands? He asked. Because they are hands. His expression almost changed. Almost. You answer questions with questions. It saves time. For the first time, I saw the smallest hint of amusement in his eyes. Then a hotel manager approached and quietly handed him a folder. Adrian glanced at it, then looked back at me. You were working on the 7th floor last night. Yes. Did you notice anyone unusual? My stomach tightened. Unusual how? He closed the folder. Someone asking about you. The lobby seemed suddenly colder. I looked toward the revolving doors. People were coming and going as usual. Business travelers, families, taxi drivers. Nobody looked suspicious. But I knew one thing about Adrian Cole already. He did not waste words. Who was asking? I whispered. His expression became serious. That is what I am trying to find out. He stepped closer, but stopped several feet away, giving me room. Emily, if someone knows who you are, I need you to tell me. My pulse quickened. You do not know who I am. Adrian held my gaze. I think you are hoping nobody does. And in that moment, I realized something that frightened me, more than his reputation ever could. Adrian Cole was not trying to uncover my secret because he wanted power over me. He was looking at me like he already suspected that someone else was searching for the same thing. That afternoon, I tried to convince myself that Adrian Cole had simply been cautious. Maybe the question about someone searching for me had nothing to do with my past. Maybe he had noticed a stranger asking about a hotel employee and decided to be responsible. That explanation lasted exactly 3 hours. At 2:18 in the afternoon, I was sitting in the employee lounge with a paper cup of coffee when the hotel manager walked in carrying a clipboard. Emily, could you come with me for a minute? My shoulders tightened. Why? A guest asked for you. I set down my coffee. Who? She hesitated. He did not give his name. Every instinct inside me went quiet. Then it started shouting. I followed her through the staff corridor and into the service hallway beside the main lobby. A man was waiting near the elevators. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair, a navy coat, and a calm expression that felt strangely familiar. The moment his eyes landed on me, his face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Evelyn? My breath caught. One word. That was all it took. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in years. The manager looked between us. Do you know each other? I answered too quickly. No. The man kept staring. You look exactly like your mother. I stepped backward. You have the wrong person. He reached into his coat and removed a small photograph. I did not take it. I did not need to. I could see enough from where I stood. A younger woman stood beside a little girl in the picture. The girl had dark hair, a round face, and the same small birthmark on her left wrist that I had been born with. My hand moved automatically toward my sleeve. The man noticed. His eyes widened. You really are her. I turned toward the manager. I need to go. But the man spoke again. Your family has been looking for you. My throat tightened. My family is gone. Not all of them. That sentence followed me all the way to the lobby. I did not remember walking there. I only remembered the sound of my own shoes against the marble and the feeling that the life I had carefully built was beginning to crack around the edges. Adrian was standing near the windows again. He looked up when I entered. His expression changed immediately. What happened? Nothing. He studied my face. That is not true. I tried to walk past him. Emily. I stopped. He did not come closer. He simply waited. Someone recognized me. His voice softened. Who? I looked at him for a long moment. He called me Evelyn. Adrian went still. Is that your name? I stared at the rain beginning to gather against the glass. It used to be. He said nothing. Somehow, that silence gave me enough courage to continue. I changed it years ago. Why? I rubbed my thumb against the edge of my sleeve. Because I wanted a life where nobody knew where I came from. Adrian looked at my covered wrist. And what happens if they find you now? I swallowed. I do not know, he finally answered. Then let me help. I shook my head. That is exactly what I am afraid of. His brow tightened. Why? I looked directly into his eyes. Because people with power always think helping means deciding for someone else. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Adrian nodded once. Fair. I expected an argument. Instead, he stepped aside and gave me a clear path to the exit. You do not have to trust me, Emily. I looked back. But if someone is searching for you, I would rather you know than remain unaware. I walked toward the doors, my mind racing. For years, I had hidden behind a different name, a different life, oversized clothes, and quiet routines. Now one stranger had spoken a single word, and suddenly the past had a face again. As I reached the entrance, I heard Adrian behind me. Emily. I turned. You said your family was gone. His eyes held mine. Who did you lose? I could not answer. Not yet. But for the first time, I wondered whether hiding had really protected me, or whether it had only delayed the moment when I would finally have to decide who I was. By 6 o'clock that evening, I had changed my mind 3 times about leaving Chicago. The first time, I packed a small suitcase. The second time, I unpacked it. The third time, I stood in my apartment staring at the front door and realized something that made my hands go cold. Running had always felt like freedom to me, but suddenly, it felt like surrender. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photograph from the hotel, the little girl beside a woman I barely remembered, the same dark hair, the same eyes, the same crescent-shaped birthmark on my left wrist. I had spent years thinking that mark was nothing more than a detail of my body. Now it felt like a key someone had finally figured out how to use. At 7:12 the next morning, someone knocked on my apartment door. 3 soft knocks. I froze. Nobody visited me without calling first. I stepped closer, checked the hallway through the peephole, and saw Adrian Cole standing there. Alone. No security team. No assistant. Just a dark coat, a folder under one arm, and the same calm expression that somehow made every room feel smaller. I opened the door halfway. What are you doing here? You left the hotel without answering my question. I did not know I had to. You do not. He held out the folder. I found something. I stared at it, but did not take it. About me. About the man who approached you. That changed everything. I opened the door a little wider. Adrian entered only after I stepped back and gave him room. He placed the folder on the small kitchen table. Inside was a copy of the photograph, several old newspaper articles, and a faded family record. My real name appeared across the top, Evelyn Marie Hart. My fingers trembled. I sat down. Where did you get this? I have people who can find records quickly. I looked up. That is exactly the problem. Adrian paused. What do you mean? You keep proving my point. I tapped the papers. You can make answers appear because you have money, connections, and people who listen to you. You probably think that makes you helpful. I think knowing the truth gives you choices. I looked back at the photograph. I do not know if I want the truth. That is your decision. His answer surprised me. He did not push. He did not tell me what I should do next. He simply waited. I turned another page. There was a report about the Hart Family Foundation closing years earlier. Another article mentioned my father stepping away from public life. Then I saw a name I had not expected. Claire Hart, my aunt, alive, living in Seattle. I stopped breathing for a moment. She is alive, Adrian nodded. According to the most recent record. I stared at the address. I thought everyone was gone. You were told that. My guardian told me there was nobody left. Adrian's expression changed slightly. Then someone made sure you believed that. The room became very quiet. I pulled my sleeve down over my wrist again. Why would anyone do that? I do not know. He looked at me carefully. But I think you deserve to find out. I stood and walked to the window. Chicago stretched below me, bright and busy, completely unaware that my carefully organized life had just shifted beneath my feet. You said you would help, I whispered. I meant it. I turned toward him. Without deciding for me, without deciding for you, even if I choose something you disagree with. Even then, something inside me loosened. Not trust, not yet, but something close to hope. Adrian picked up his coat. There is one more thing. I looked at him. What? He reached into the folder and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a recent photograph of a woman standing outside a bookstore in Seattle. My heart stopped. She had my mother's eyes. Under the picture was a handwritten note. 4 words. I know you are alive. I looked up at Adrian, my voice barely audible. She knows where I am? Adrian held my gaze. I think she has been waiting for you to find her. For the first time in years, the future did not look like something I needed to escape. It looked like a door, and somewhere on the other side of it was a woman who might finally know my real name. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, with the photograph still on my nightstand. Claire Hart, my aunt. Alive. I had stared at her face for hours the night before, searching for memories that refused to come back clearly. A kitchen filled with sunlight, someone laughing near a window, a blue sweater, a woman's voice telling me not to worry. Then nothing. I reached for the photograph and turned it over. On the back, in careful handwriting, were 6 words. I never stopped looking for you. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt afraid. Hope can be frightening when you have spent years teaching yourself not to expect anything from the future. At 9 in the morning, Adrian called. I almost did not answer. Hello, did you sleep? Not really, neither did I. I sat up in bed. Why? There was a pause. Because I kept thinking about what you said. Which part? About power. I did not know what to say. Adrian continued. You were right. It is easy to confuse having resources with knowing what is best for someone. I smiled despite myself. That sounded almost humble. Do not get used to it. His voice was dry but softer than usual. I have a flight to Seattle this afternoon. My smile disappeared. You said you wanted to find your aunt. I thought you might want someone there. I did not ask you to come. I know. He paused. That is why I am asking. I looked down at the photograph in my hand. And if I say no, then I will stay in Chicago. There was no argument, no pressure, just a choice sitting between us. That simple fact unsettled me more than any command could have. I will think about it, I said. Take your time. He ended the call. I sat there for several minutes, listening to the city wake beyond my apartment window. At noon, I packed 1 small suitcase, jeans, sweaters, 2 shirts, my old sneakers. I almost packed the oversized grey sweater, then stopped. I left it on the chair. It was strange how heavy that decision felt. I had worn that sweater so many times that it had become part of my disguise. For years, I had used oversized clothes to make myself smaller, quieter, harder to recognize. This time, I chose a simple blue cardigan instead. It fit normally. Nothing about it was dramatic. But when I looked in the mirror, I noticed something I had almost forgotten. I looked like myself. At the airport, Adrian was waiting near the coffee shop. He had 2 tickets in his hand but held them loosely, as though he would give one away without hesitation if I changed my mind. His eyes settled on me. He did not comment on the clothes. He only smiled slightly. You came. I changed my mind. Good. We started walking toward the gate. After a few steps, I noticed he was not walking ahead of me. He stayed beside me. There is something you should know, he said. Before we land? Yes. He handed me a second envelope. Inside was a copy of a letter written 12 years earlier. It was addressed to me. My hands started shaking before I finished the first sentence. Dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, then you are finally old enough to choose for yourself. I hope one day you understand that leaving was never about abandoning you. It was about giving you a chance to grow up free. I read it twice. Then I looked at Adrian. She knew I would find this. She hoped you would. I folded the letter carefully. For the first time, I understood that maybe my past had not been a wall built to keep me trapped. Maybe someone had left a door open. I just had to be brave enough to walk through it. Seattle greeted us with a pale afternoon sky and a cold breeze that smelled faintly of rain. By the time Adrian and I left the airport, I had read Claire's letter so many times that I could almost hear her voice between the lines. We took a quiet sedan into the city, passing tall glass buildings, coffee shops crowded with people, and streets lined with wet pavement reflecting the grey sky. Adrian sat beside me without asking questions. That was becoming one of the strangest things about him. He could have filled every silence with instructions, plans, and solutions. Instead, he let the silence exist. "The bookstore is 3 blocks from here," he said eventually. I looked at the address on my phone. "And you are sure she still works there?" "The records show she owns the building." I stared out the window. "That sounds like someone who built a life." Adrian smiled faintly. "Maybe she was waiting for you to build yours." We stopped outside a small independent bookstore, with a green awning and warm lights glowing through the windows. People browsed quietly inside. A handwritten sign near the door advertised a Saturday reading event. My chest tightened. "What if she does not want me there?" I asked. Adrian looked at me. "Then you walk away. And you?" "I walk with you." That answer stayed with me as we entered. A bell chimed above the door. The smell of paper and coffee surrounded us. Somewhere behind a shelf, someone laughed. It sounded normal, safe, almost painfully normal. Then I heard a voice from the back of the store. "Can I help you?" I turned. A woman stepped into view holding a stack of books. She was in her late 50s, with silver blonde hair, warm green eyes, and a soft blue sweater. I knew her immediately. I did not know how. My body simply knew before my mind did. The books slipped slightly in her hands. Her eyes moved across my face, then lower. They stopped at my left wrist. I had forgotten to pull my sleeve down. Her expression changed. "Evelyn." My breath caught. I could not speak. Adrian quietly stepped away from me, leaving the space between us open. The woman covered her mouth with one hand. "Oh my God." Tears filled her eyes. "It is really you." I finally found my voice. "Are you Claire?" She nodded. I took one step forward, then another. We stood only a few feet apart, staring at each other like two pieces of a memory that had been separated for too long. "I thought you were gone," I whispered. "I thought you were gone." Claire shook her head slowly. "I looked for you everywhere." I looked at Adrian. He gave the smallest nod. Not permission, not instruction, just reassurance. I faced Claire again. "Why did you let me believe I had no one?" Her expression broke with sadness. "Because I believed the people who told me you needed protection from this family." "Protection from what?" Claire glanced toward the front windows. "From becoming part of a world you did not choose." My heart beat faster. "What world?" She set the books down. "Your family had money, influence, expectations. Everyone thought they knew what your life should become. Your father wanted you to inherit everything. Other people wanted access to that power. You were a child, Evelyn. I wanted one thing for you." "What?" She smiled through tears. "A normal life." I looked down at my oversized sleeves, suddenly understanding why the plain life had always felt so important to me. "Then why did you find me now?" Claire walked closer. "Because you are old enough to decide whether you want the truth." I looked at Adrian. "And if the truth changes everything," he answered before Claire could, "then you change with it." I smiled despite the tears in my eyes. For once, nobody was telling me who I had to be. Claire was offering me the past. Adrian was offering me the freedom to choose what came next. And standing between them, I realized the secret I had been protecting for years was not really my identity. It was my fear of letting anyone see the person I had become. The truth did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces, each one changing the shape of the life I thought I understood. Claire closed the bookstore early that evening, and we sat together in a small cafe 2 blocks away, while Seattle rain traced slow lines down the window. Adrian sat across from us, quiet as always, listening. Claire told me about my family, the foundation, the expectations, and the years of confusion after my father disappeared from public life. But there was one detail she had avoided. She finally looked at Adrian. "You should tell her." He met my eyes. "Tell me what? Who he really is?" I felt my stomach tighten. I already knew Adrian was not simply a wealthy businessman. I had heard the whispers in Chicago. I had seen the way people reacted when he entered a room. Still, hearing the truth from Claire made it different. Adrian folded his hands on the table. "My family has been connected to organized business networks for generations." Claire gave him a look. "That is one way to describe it." He exhaled slowly. "I run a criminal organization." The words were simple. No drama, no excuses. I stared at him. "And you thought it was a good idea to let me travel across the country with you? You were never in danger because of me." I shook my head. "That is not what I asked." Adrian remained calm. "I should have told you sooner." Something about that honesty mattered. He could have hidden behind a polished explanation. Instead, he admitted the truth. I looked down at my coffee. "So when you said you had people who could find records, they work for me. And when you said you could protect me, I meant it." I looked back at him. "You could have told me from the beginning." "Yes." He did not defend himself. That made me angrier somehow. "You are used to people obeying you." His expression softened. "Yes. And you think that gives you the right to decide what happens next?" "No." The answer came immediately. "Then why are you still here?" Adrian looked at me for a long moment. "Because I care what happens to you." The cafe suddenly seemed too quiet. Claire looked down at her tea, giving us privacy without leaving. I swallowed. "That sounds dangerous. For me, maybe." I almost smiled. "You really do not know how to make things simple." "I am trying." I looked at his face and realized he meant it. Adrian Cole, the man people feared, was sitting across from me without giving an order, without making a demand, without telling me what choice to make. He was simply waiting. Then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "We know Evelyn Hart is in Seattle." I stared at it. Claire saw my face change. Adrian did too. He leaned forward, but stopped himself before reaching for my phone. "Do you want me to see it?" I handed it to him. He read the message once, then returned the phone. "What do you want to do?" The question surprised me. "You are asking me?" "Yes." I looked at Claire, then at Adrian. For years, other people had made decisions for me, in the name of protection, family, or convenience. I had spent half my life becoming invisible, because I believed that was the only way to remain free. But now I understood something. Freedom was not disappearing. It was being seen, and still being allowed to choose. I took a breath. "I want to go back to Chicago." Adrian nodded. "Then we go back." Claire reached across the table and took my hand. "You do not have to hide anymore." I looked at my wrist, at the small crescent-shaped birthmark I had spent years covering, without even thinking about it. Slowly, I pulled my sleeve back. I let the mark stay visible. For once, I did not feel the need to hide it. Adrian noticed, but he said nothing, and somehow, that silence felt like respect. By the time we landed back in Chicago, I had stopped pretending that everything could return to normal. The message from Seattle remained on my phone, and Claire's words stayed in my mind. "You do not have to hide anymore." I wanted to believe her. I really did, but belief was easier in a bookstore than in the city where I had spent years becoming invisible. Adrian and I returned to the Bellamy that evening. The lobby looked exactly as it had before: bright lights, polished marble, people moving with quiet purpose. Yet I felt different walking through it. For years, I had passed those same windows with my head lowered. Tonight, I looked up. Adrian noticed. He did not say anything. That was becoming our strange rhythm. He noticed everything, but he was learning not to interfere. We reached his office on the top floor, and he placed a folder on the desk. I had my people trace the message. I looked at him, and the number belongs to a private investigator. Who hired him? We do not know yet. I took a breath. Could we find out? Yes. He paused. But I will not do anything until you decide what you want. I stared at him. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. I walked toward the window. Chicago glittered below us, a sea of headlights and office lights stretching into the distance. I spent years thinking that if I stayed quiet enough, nobody could make decisions about my life. Adrian stood several feet behind me. And now? Now I am starting to think I made myself invisible for so long that I forgot how to be visible. He said nothing. I turned around. I want to know who is looking for me. Adrian nodded. Then we find out. The next morning, we learned the investigator had been hired by a private legal firm connected to the Heart Foundation. My old family name was still attached to accounts, property, and a dormant charitable trust. I had expected secrets. I had not expected a life waiting for me on paper. There was one more surprise. The foundation wanted me to attend a board meeting in Chicago. My identity was no longer something I could keep hidden forever. Adrian offered to accompany me. I almost said no. Then I looked at him. You cannot speak for me. I know. You cannot answer questions for me. I know. And you cannot turn this into one of your business meetings. A faint smile appeared. I will sit quietly. I laughed. That may be the hardest thing you have ever done. The following afternoon, I stood outside the foundation offices wearing a simple navy dress and a light cardigan. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to make me disappear. My left wrist was uncovered. The small crescent-shaped birthmark was visible beneath the sleeve. My hands were shaking. Adrian noticed. You can still leave, he said. I looked at the doors. Then I looked at him. Do you think I should? I think you should do what you want. I smiled. Then I am going in. The meeting room became silent when I entered. Older faces turned toward me. Some looked surprised. Others looked uncertain. One woman stood and whispered, Evelyn Hart. I took a slow breath. My name is Emily Carter, I said. But I used to be Evelyn Hart. Nobody spoke. I continued. I am not here to take back a title. I am not here for money. I am here because I spent years believing my past belonged to everyone except me. My voice trembled, but I kept going. Today, I am choosing to decide what happens next. I glanced toward Adrian. He was exactly where he promised to be, sitting quietly, letting me speak. For the first time, I understood the difference between someone standing in front of you and someone standing beside you. When the meeting ended, I stepped into the hallway and exhaled slowly. My hands were still shaking. Adrian walked toward me. How do you feel? I looked down at my uncovered wrist. Then I smiled. Like I just met myself. He smiled back. That sounds important. It is. And for the first time, I knew the next choice would be mine. 3 weeks passed before I realized I had stopped checking the locks twice before bed. It was such a small change that I almost missed it. For years, caution had been part of my routine. Check the door. Check the hallway. Pull the sleeves down. Keep my voice quiet. Stay forgettable. But after the foundation meeting, those habits began to loosen one by one. My life did not become perfect. It simply became mine. Claire called every Sunday afternoon from Seattle. Sometimes we talked for 20 minutes, sometimes 2 hours. She told me stories about my mother that I had forgotten, little things that mattered more than the family records ever could. The way my mother sang while cooking, the way she always bought fresh flowers on Fridays, the way she believed a person's name should never determine the size of their dreams. I listened to every story like I was collecting pieces of myself. Adrian changed too, not dramatically, quietly. He still ran his business empire with the same confidence, but I noticed that he started asking questions before making decisions that affected other people. He listened longer. He interrupted less. One evening, I found him sitting alone in the Bellamy lobby with a cup of coffee, watching the rain move across the windows. I sat beside him. You look tired. He glanced at me. I am. You could go home. So could you. I smiled. I like it here. He looked at my wrist. The small crescent-shaped birthmark was uncovered, just as it had been since the day of the foundation meeting. You stopped hiding it. I looked down. I stopped thinking it needed to be hidden. Adrian nodded slowly. That is different. Very. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said something I did not expect. I have been thinking about leaving part of my business. I turned toward him. Leaving? Not everything, just the parts that depend on fear and control. I studied his face. Why? He looked at me, and for once there was no polished answer waiting behind his eyes. Because you were right. I laughed softly. About which part? Power does not mean deciding for everyone. His voice was quiet. I spent years believing control was protection. Then I met you. My heart tightened. Adrian. He shook his head. I am not asking you for anything. I just want you to know that you changed how I see my life. I looked at him for a long moment. You changed how I see mine too. The rain continued tapping against the glass. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand declaration. No promises about forever. Just two people sitting beside each other, finally honest enough to be seen. A month later, I left the Bellamy. I had accepted a position with the foundation, helping create a program for young adults who had spent years living under identities chosen by other people. It felt meaningful. It felt right. On my last evening at the hotel, I stood in the employee hallway and looked at the oversized grey sweater hanging inside my locker. I had kept it there for years. I picked it up, held it for a moment, and then folded it carefully into a donation box. It had once been my armor. Now it was simply clothing. When I stepped into the lobby, Adrian was waiting by the front doors. "Ready?" he asked. I smiled. "Yes." We walked outside together. The rain had stopped. Chicago was glowing beneath the evening lights, the sidewalks shining beneath our feet. Adrian looked at me and smiled. "You look like yourself." I laughed softly. For the first time. He did not reach for my hand. He simply walked beside me, leaving the choice to me. So I reached over and took his hand. He looked down, then back at me. "Your decision?" he asked. "Mine." We kept walking. I had spent years believing freedom meant staying hidden. I finally understood the truth. Freedom was not disappearing from the world. It was standing in the middle of it without apologizing for who you were. And love, I learned, was not someone choosing your future for you. It was someone standing beside you while you chose it yourself. I was no longer Emily hiding behind oversized clothes. I was no longer Evelyn running from a name. I was simply myself. Seen, known, free. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.